My name is Frances Carter. I'm a photographer based in Tamaki Makaurau, also known as Auckland, New Zealand. And I'm a photographer. I specialise in portraiture, often featuring musicians and artists. I do a bit of commercial work as well, and occasionally some video directing. I actually picked up photography as a hobby when I was about 14 years old. There were photography classes at my high school and I wasn't in them. And so when I realised that I really enjoyed it as a hobby, I went to the photography teacher and I showed her some of the work that I'd been doing in my own time. And I said, "Can you let me into the class?" And she actually said no. So I never got any formal training. I went to a university after high school and I did a visual art degree. So in that sense, there was like a little bit of formal training, but it was more around concepts rather than technical stuff. The technical education that I have came more after I finished studying, when I began to work in equipment rental houses. So my job there was to know like every light stand, every piece of grip, every modifier, just everything, know what it's called, know how it works, be able to explain that to people. And I think that part of my work training was probably what's given me the best technical base. There wasn't really a point where I decided that photography was going to be my career. It just kind of was what I did and continued to be what I did, and here I am 12 plus years later still doing it. So yeah, it wasn't intentional to make it my job, but I'm glad that it's turned out this way. So I started photographing musicians in high school. I was friends with a lot of musicians and I was one of the few people in my friend group who couldn't play an instrument. So my contribution to the scene was to photograph people. We had quite a thriving all ages scene going on in Auckland here. And I used to go along to every gig that I could and I'd take photos of what was going down. This was back in the era of Facebook albums, so people would expect like 200 photos the next day after a gig. And one, that was a great way to sort of let people know that I was a photographer. Everyone just knew because they'd be tagged in a photo at one point or another. So in our small community, I kind of got associated with photography. So it was like a little bit documentary, a little bit live music. And that kind of naturally turned into more staged press photography as the musicians that I was working with became more and more talented, successful, serious about it. I do a lot of work with musicians. I photograph musicians for their press, album covers, things like that. I also work on music videos sometimes. I feel like music photography is one of the types of photography that can sort of gain importance over time. So even though the picture might be great when you take it, it could be that 30 years down the line, people look back on the career of that artist and an image that you captured is like the definitive image. So I always hope that I can get those shots of people. I think that our music scene here in Aotearoa is really, really strong. We have world-class talent and I just want to show them off, really. I also spent quite a few years working as a photographic assistant, so I was working on other people's sets, doing their lighting, and that was a great way to learn about just like different approaches to lighting and camera work and stuff. Even when I was working in equipment rentals or as a photographic assistant, I was always doing my own work on the side. Naturally over time that just kind of increased until it was like maybe a 50-50 split of working for other people and doing my own shoots. And actually the push that took me to full-time photographic work was the pandemic. I experienced quite a bit of instability with work around that time because we had pretty long lockdowns here where I wasn't able to work. The longest one was about 3 months. It actually gave me like a really clean break from assisting, and I had a conversation with my now agent as we were coming out of that lockdown, and it was just the timing was right. She was ready to sign someone new, and we knew each other from my work as an assistant. That was the push, was her saying, "Let me take you on," and then I knew if I had a few commercial jobs coming through the agency side, then I'd be able to balance that with my music work and make it happen full time. And here we are almost 3 years later and it's working. Assisting can teach you a lot, not only about how other photographers do their work on set in terms of lighting and camera, but things that are less obvious, like what is every crew member's role and who do you talk to if you have an issue on set? As an assistant, should you speak to the art director Probably not. It's good to know that kind of stuff, just how to handle yourself on a bigger set. Yeah, I found that experience really invaluable from assisting. So the video part of my work came about, again, when I was working in equipment rentals. So I worked in a studio that had quite a lot of video gear as well. And because I was an employee there, it was sort of on me to learn how it all worked and what it was called. So I'm someone who learns by doing. So I just picked it up and started making videos, quite experimental stuff, just with friends. A lot of it was like DIY music videos, and that was my way to figure out like the camera menus and what a codec is and all of those kinds of things, frame rate, like stuff that was completely unfamiliar to me as a still photographer. So yeah, I just basically learned through doing, and I'm still going. Still got a lot to learn, but I think it's really helpful as a photographer to also have a little bit of experience with video. People often want both out of you on a job, and I think it's nice to be able to offer both. The Beths are one of the most successful indie bands out of this country. They're such amazing people, and they're so talented. I was like so honored when they asked me to make a video for that song, because as soon as I heard it, I just knew like that's like that song's gonna last for years and years. That's like a classic. It's a classic and it's happening right now. But yeah, again, with that one, we went through quite a few different ideas about what that video could be until we landed on something quite simple in the end. I knew the song was so special and I wanted to do it justice, and I wanted it to be bigger because I felt like the song was big, but then reality and budgets meant that we had to keep the idea very simple. So we shot at the house of Larry, who features in the video, and the crew was very, very small. We did the whole thing in one day, but I feel it happened the way it was always meant to happen. And looking back on it, I think the like hometown kind of feel, the simplicity of it really suits the song. Larry was a perfect person to have involved in that, and I love when you read through the comments on that video, every now and then someone will be like, who is this guy? I want him to be my friend. And then Larry will jump in and reply and he'll be like, it's me. So I hope he's made a few friends out of that video. I really love working with colored lights. That sort of developed out of my teenage love of like Photoshop and color grading. I think color grading was probably one of the things that got me really hooked on photography. Is like not just the taking of the photo, but what you can do with it afterwards. And as my skills, I guess, have progressed, I've tried to pull back a bit on the post-production and do a lot of that rich color in camera. The change in lighting equipment that's been happening over the past 10 years or so has been a real influence on my work as well. Like the adoption of full spectrum LEDs. It just makes it so easy to play with color and also to do it single-handedly. If you're using strobes and you need to gel all the strobes, it really, really helps to have an extra pair of hands to help you test all that lighting and set it up. Whereas if you're using full spectrum LEDs, they're just on constantly. You can see what you're doing way more easily, so it becomes an option to work alone and to experiment alone with color. Yeah, a lot of musicians in particular talk about synesthesia in their work and how they feel like their music has a color. And even though I'm coming from the visual side rather than the auditory side, I kind of have the same feelings, especially when I'm working with musicians. Like there's a mood to what they're producing, and it's my job to interpret that in a visual sense, which is quite difficult because obviously they're different mediums, but I think color plays a big role in trying to represent sound. So that's definitely a part of where that comes from in my work. My advice to photographers who want to do what I do is to specialize, find your thing and do that thing. I think I spread myself across quite a few different genres when I was starting out, and I reached a point where people were referring to me as a fashion photographer, and although I did enjoy shooting fashion, I was like, I don't think that's me. Like I want to be known as the music photographer. So I intentionally pulled back on my fashion work, and I was like, I do music, this is what I do. And it took about 4 or 5 years until people's perception of my work changed, and now that's what I am known for. And now that I have found that niche, I feel a bit more able to explore other things, but I think it's better to stick with one thing than to spread yourself across like landscape, product, portrait, weddings. Don't do everything. There's enough of us. We don't all need to do it all. I think there's something to be said for not going all in too soon, because I had my side work, whether that's in equipment rentals or photo assisting or whatever other things I did. It was many years until I was relying solely on photography for an income. So having that side income gave me the flexibility to turn down jobs that I didn't feel were right for the type of photographer I wanted to be known as. It's really tempting to just say yes to any job that you get offered. But in my experience, if you do a job and you do it well, people are going to be like, oh, you shot really cool photos of my son's 3rd birthday party. Can you do it for my friend's son's 3rd birthday party? And then before you know it, you're like the children's birthday party photographer. And you're like, wait, hang on. Hang on, I wanted to do fashion. So if you want to do fashion, do fashion. Don't do the other stuff, like find another job. I love going and looking at my own website. I don't know if that's weird to say, but I think I'm like, you know, the millennial generation, and I've been working with mostly digital. I do shoot film occasionally, but I'm mostly a digital photographer, and we just never see anything physically. So I don't print my work. I don't ever get to look at my archive, I guess, in like a really overarching way. And I feel like my website is currently the best place to go to see the years of work that I've put into this career. Yeah, it's highlights my best stuff. I think Instagram's good as well for like just putting out what you're doing at the moment. But in terms of showing where your focus is and what themes might run through your work, I love how I can curate my website to show that. I get really like perfectionist about what's on there. Yeah, I've been using client galleries a lot recently. That was a new addition to my workflow, and I really like being able to send people to my website to look at the long list of the shots that they are going to make selects from. I also like putting my favorite image from the shoot as the title page image. So when people go to look at their photos from the shoot, they're not going to like, you know, a Dropbox folder or something that doesn't look nice. There's like a bit of style to it, and I can start with like a really good image right on the homepage to be like, don't worry, we got the shot. And then they go in and see everything else. Client galleries have been a game changer. It's so much better than what I was doing before, which was just like Dropbox, Google Drive, like everything was everywhere. No shade to those companies because they also provide great services. But client galleries is classy. I feel like it's the full service. I find having a good looking website that I have to do absolutely nothing to on the back end is amazing. It's like a level of professionalism that is really easy to achieve.